We move to the protagonist's house, Sierra, who stealthily moves down an empty hallway towards her husband's room, trying not to make the slightest noise. Her heart pounds rapidly and her breathing quickens, as she has just learned about the treacherous behavior of her friend Bellietta, linked to the deception of the Bosbon family. Upon reaching the door, Sierra hears heavy breathing and strange moans coming from inside the room. She sees her kissing her husband passionately, and although their eyes meet, Bellietta shows no blush whatsoever. Fury takes hold of her, but her anger is not only because of her husband's infidelity, but also because of how her friend's family is destroying her guild. Bellietta, with a crazed smile, asks why Sierra arrived earlier than agreed. She cinches a silk robe around her shoulders, and with feigned calmness, questions why she stares so coldly. Staring, full of hatred, she looks at her coldly, without even blinking so as not to show weakness. She exhales deeply, understanding that she can no longer endure the actions of the Bosbon family that endanger her guild. Her thoughts return to her deceased parents, whose faces are immortalized in a large family portrait. Sierra remembers how she cried buckets in front of the portrait, unable to bear the pain of the loss, while her loyal maid comforted her. Of her parents, only a small, intricately carved and richly decorated box remains, which she considers her greatest treasure. Now she understands that she has lost almost everything: friends, family, glory, wealth, reputation, and even her own husband. In a cold and angry voice, she addresses Bellietta, who, despite Sierra's words, maintains an appearance of absolute calm. Sierra, full of despair, demands that her friend answer if she is satisfied with having destroyed her life to the foundations. Bellietta is not satisfied, because Sierra still has something she intends to snatch away. With a smile, she claims that Sierra doesn't even imagine the surprises she still has in store for her. Approaching Sierra's hidden box, she opens it disdainfully, saying her friend has always been naive. Sierra watches Bellietta's actions in horror, not understanding how she managed to access her most hidden possession. Sierra's eyes fill with terror. Her hands begin to tremble, while her face breaks out in a sweat from the fear invading her. Lady Bosbon, for her part, seems completely sure of her ability to destroy the remnants of Sierra's life. Sarcastically, she asks if she truly believed the box would remain safe just because of her relationship with the Archbishop. She adds disdainfully that without the Bosbon surname, all of Sierra's efforts are useless, no matter how much she tries. In desperation, Sierra screams, asking for the box back, as she understands she has nothing left to lose. But Bellietta, with a smile, reminds her that Sierra still has something left: a rich necklace that shines on her neck. She received that necklace from a mysterious gentleman about whom nothing is known, but he will clearly play a crucial role in the future. Sierra cannot understand why Bellietta is so obsessed with the ornament, to the point of offending the memory of her deceased parents. For Lady Bosbon, the value of the necklace lies not in its price, but in the fact that it belongs exclusively to Sierra and is linked to her. Little by little, the pieces clear up in Sierra's mind, and she begins to understand that Bellietta is obsessed with her much more than it seemed. Sierra takes a brave step and announces that she is willing to give up the ornament, to which Bellietta responds with a satisfied smile. And pleased. Then she calmly and confidently approaches her friend, who is still holding the box so precious to her in her hands. Suddenly, Sierra's expression changes radically. Calm transforms into overflowing, almost desperate fury. With a shrill scream, she demands her parents back, insinuating that the contents of the box are the dust of her loved ones. Bellietta panics, completely bewildered by Sierra's plans and what she is trying to achieve. She resists with all her might, preventing Sierra from taking the box, but suddenly the protagonist screams in pain. Blood rapidly gushes from her body, indicating a deep wound that almost causes Sierra to lose consciousness. It turns out that the sword blow was dealt by her husband, who had been ordering her to stop all this time. But she didn't listen. Losing her balance, Sierra falls onto the balcony, clinging to the railings, while Bellietta throws herself into her husband's arms. The protagonist loses the last trace of will to live. Her eyes turn dull, and only emptiness remains in her soul. Looking back, Sierra realizes that her entire life she was deceived, used, and manipulated, losing everything she loved. But suddenly, a faint spark of hope emerges within her, and clinging to the railings, she tries to get up. Bellietta and her husband finally notice Sierra's actions, and Lady Bosbon begins to show evident concern. However, Sierra, determined to end her suffering, crosses the railings, ready to conclude her story. Suddenly, Bellietta screams her name in a panic attack, as if afraid of losing her forever. Sierra, instead, calmly submerges herself into the icy water, saying goodbye to a life that has turned into pure sorrow. But at that moment, she hears an unknown voice telling her that she will not be able to escape an important figure to her. The voice affirms that everything will start anew, and that the course of her destiny will restart without giving her any choice. Sierra is overwhelmed by what has happened. She cannot understand who dares to intervene in her life and snatch away the long-desired peace. The voice, ignoring her screams and pleas, firmly orders her to accept her fate and submit to the new reality. Despite her desperate attempts to resist, Sierra's consciousness slowly fades away and dissolves into nothingness. Upon waking, she finds herself in a carriage where Bellietta is sitting next to her, as if nothing had happened. Sierra is completely confused, silent, and does not respond to Bellietta's questions, which makes her suspicious. Her thoughts clear up. Somehow, she has returned to her youthful body before all the tragic events of her life. Reflecting on the past, Sierra understands that Bellietta has been imitating her movements for some time now. Mannerisms, clothes, jewelry, and hobbies. For example, one day she stared intensely at a brooch that belonged to her friend. Trying to resemble Sierra in every way, she wanted to find out where she had obtained that jewel. Taking Bellietta's behavior as excessive admiration, she ignored the fact that she was copying every detail of her. As a result, Sierra was criticized behind her back, accused of being the one imitating her friend. And over time, society concluded that Sierra was an imposter. Failing to control the situation in time, she ended up being a faceless shadow of Bellietta Bosbon. She no longer wanted to participate in social life, and her parents silently supported her. Sierra broke off with social gatherings and with Bellietta, dedicating her efforts to educating her sister. Her family was wealthy, owning vast lands and mines, so her business skills proved particularly useful. However, the Bosbon family decided to attack the Brilux family. The head of the Bosbon house filed a lawsuit over a contract signed 300 years ago. Moreover, they had the backing of finance and justice ministers. The contract between the founder of Brilux and Duke Bosbon was worded unprofessionally, allowing multiple interpretations. Sierra's father feared he realized too late, as Bosbon had already made up his mind. Now, facing the absolute power of the Bosbons, Sierra's family's wealth was worthless. Every day, her parents looked more desolate and did not know how to face the situation. Suddenly, Bellietta appeared, crying and swearing to help the Brilux family. She tries to convince her that she is on their side, appearing as sincere as possible. She begs her to trust her, and the protagonist, worn down by life, opens her heart to her. After those words, Bellietta disappeared, and as if by magic, the court case was cancelled. It was a happy ending, after 6 months of tense struggle by the Brilux family. As a sign of deep gratitude, Sierra sincerely thanked Mrs. Bosbon, considering her help invaluable and saving for her family. She did not suspect how naive she was then, as all of Bellietta's help turned out to be just a well-planned performance. Naturally, their relationship soon returned to its former state, and Sierra and Bellietta began spending a lot of time together again. Meanwhile, people started whispering behind their backs again. But Mrs. Brillaxon could no longer regain her old reputation. After some time, Sierra tried to distance herself from Bellietta again, but she had already started acting against her in secret. Later, Sierra quickly put all the pieces together and finally understood the whole truth about her friend. Bellietta's obsession was so intense that she would never have allowed Sierra and her family to move away from her like that. Now we move to the future, to Sierra's new life, as she travels in a car. and converses with Bellietta. Sierra tries to understand what happened to her after the transition to another life, and whose mysterious voice she heard before dying. But in the panic that overwhelmed her, her mind refused to function, and she only heard the violent pounding of her heart. Mrs. Bosbon, sitting opposite, asks Sierra how she feels, sounding genuinely concerned. And careful. Looking up, Sierra meets her friend's gaze. Her eyes are full of unease, but they look painfully familiar. In them, she sees the shadow of that person who tortured her, ruined her family's life, and was involved in her death. To understand at what point in time she is, Sierra decides to examine the circumstances of her current life. She finds out that Bellietta is now 18 years old. Therefore, she moved back 7 years. Realizing this, Sierra remembers the effort her friend made to destroy her, and feels bitterness. She begins to consider how unfair it is that someone mysterious is forcing her to go through all this horror again. She understands that she will no longer be able to bear the loss of her beloved family and everything that matters to her. A devastating feeling arises within her as the prospect of losing everything. And dying terrifies her. But she decides that this time her life will not be as Belly wants to see it, and she will change everything. So, feigning calmness, she assures her friend that she feels perfectly fine and thanks her for her care. However, deep down, she knows she is ready to take extreme measures to finish Belly off for good. 7 years have passed since those events, and for Sierra they seem shrouded in fog. So she asks her friend where they are going. It turns out they are going to a banquet hosted by one of the most faithful followers of the Bosbon family. And Sierra does not remember if anything memorable happened there. Still, she feels an inexplicable unease. Veli expresses her joy and enthusiasm for attending the banquet. It is revealed that she had been plotting a cunning and Machiavellian plan for some time, ready to execute. The girls were dressed almost identically, which could trigger another wave of uncomfortable rumors. Veli starts asking when Sierra plans to tell her the truth about the necklace. The ornament turns out to be the one the gentleman gave her, although it remains a mystery whether it is the head of the house or an enigmatic character. It was discovered that Bellietta had dreamed for a long time of obtaining this necklace, and the idea never left her for years. Sierra decides to take advantage of Bellietta's curiosity and tells her she will tell her everything, but under strict confidentiality. When Bellietta finds out she has to extract the stone herself, she immediately shows her displeasure. However, Sierra intentionally devised this as a method to force her friend to leave the city. At least for a moment. The girls finally arrive at the banquet venue and enter the hall full of festive atmosphere. Sierra observes the Marquis, whom literally everyone present tries to please and win his favor. It is understandable. Not only is he of noble lineage, but he also plays a key role on the Western Front. At that moment, Sierra remembers that another important figure is expected among the guests. Just then, the solemn arrival of Duke Rippleton at the banquet is announced. He is a tall man, with a cold aristocratic appearance and light hair that attracts all eyes. The Duke was known in high society as the Ghost Duke, as he avoided social life, and appeared very rarely. Even Sierra, although she had heard rumors, sees him for the first time with her own eyes. He managed a region famous for its bad reputation, with impassable roads and dangerous monsters. Even the imperial family proved powerless against these problems, which undoubtedly caused them discomfort. The Rippleton family dealt with the monsters, quickly restored order, and gained the emperor's favor, who granted them a title. Members of this family were such rare guests at social events that their presence always generated expectation. Bellietta approaches Sierra to ask how she feels, and she, with a smile, admits that she loved the wine. Bellietta, clearly pleased with the answer, smiles even wider. There is no doubt that she had already drunk quite a bit. Sierra couldn't ignore it, as Bellietta only drank when she herself had a glass. However, that night, Sierra did not taste a single drop, which seemed quite strange. Bellietta openly confesses that her head is spinning from the wine and accumulated tension. Sierra quickly grabs a maid and asks her to take her friend to an empty room to rest for a while. Thus, a rare opportunity arises for Sierra to be alone with her thoughts. She understands that in Bellietta's presence, it is difficult for her to concentrate, so this moment is especially valuable to her. Suddenly, memories of what happened at this very banquet in the past begin to return to Sierra. It was at this same banquet that she met her husband, who later, along with Bellietta, inflicted devastating betrayal upon her. Before her eyes, the vivid and painful memories of her life with him come alive. She remembers with particular clarity the moment when, without hesitation, he pierced her with his sword to protect his lover. A man named Bellietta unexpectedly approaches Sierra, and with feigned kindness asks how she is. Gathering all her composure, Sierra discreetly thanks him for his interest and greets Leighton. That is the man who always wanted to elevate the Bosbon family, which is why he was looking for any way to gain their trust. Leighton casually notices that Sierra doesn't seem to value the wine, but she pretends not to have heard him. Meanwhile, he suggests he could offer her something special from his vast collection if she wishes. In the past, she would have accepted his offer gratefully, seeing such generosity as sincere and warm. But now she is completely indifferent to his words and immediately refuses, stating that she is no longer interested in such a thing. She even dares to clarify whether the invitation was directed at her, or, rather, at Bellietta. Upon hearing this unexpected question, Leighton freezes, clumsily trying to maintain a kind expression. However, his face clearly tightens, as if his forced smile can no longer hide his irritation. An awkward silence follows, which the man certainly did not expect and for which he is completely unprepared. Sierra decides to lighten the situation, smiling slightly and saying it was just a joke. Leighton joins in her tone, making an effort to joke that, of course, she is more important than everyone. But he betrays himself by adding that he would also be happy to see Bellietta, thus ruining his attempt. Despite everything, Sierra painstakingly maintains a kind smile, hiding her inner irony behind it. He thanks Leighton for his concern, but adds that Bellietta drank too much and is resting now. At that moment, the young woman mentally scolds herself for having understood that person so wrongly before. Leighton tries to change the subject, suggesting that it might be uncomfortable for Sierra to talk to him without her friend. With a smile, Sierra proposes organizing a meeting of 3 next time so that everyone feels more comfortable talking. After Leighton leaves, Sierra strolls unhurriedly through the hall, enjoying the moment of silence and solitude. Suddenly, she perceives low whispers behind her and sees 2 girls obviously discussing her. As expected, their attention focused on Sierra's similar dresses and Julieta, triggering another wave of rumors. Lady Brilluxen is saddened by having to hear once again how strange her imitation of her friend appears. In her previous life, the condemnation from society caused her great pain and left deep wounds. Even if she tried to defend herself, no one believed her, which made the situation desperate. But now she has the opportunity to change her destiny, so she decides to approach the gossips directly. Seeing her approach, the girls firmly claim they were only having an uncommitted conversation. But Sierra immediately accuses the shameless ones of lying. Her words leave the girls stunned. She makes a biting remark to them, adding that they aren't so pitiful as to waste time on gossip. Then, maintaining a firm tone, she gives them direct advice not to say unnecessary things in public places to avoid trouble. She doesn't hesitate to openly threaten those who spread rumors about her, which ends up intimidating the girls. Feeling the absolute victor, Lady Brilluxen proudly bids farewell and leaves the place. The girls look at each other confused, not knowing how to react, as it is the first time they have seen Sierra so tough. It seems Sierra's behavior in this situation causes discontent and some irritation in them, especially in the brunette, who clearly enjoyed bothering Lady Brilluxen. Meanwhile, Sierra heads to the lounge, feeling a growing headache, and sits down tiredly on the sofa. Seeing how Leighton treats her, she is convinced again that the events of her past life were real. Now she understands that everything will no longer be as before, and that there is no return to the past. Sierra realizes that she must become strong enough never again to yield to external influence. However, suddenly loud voices are heard, more like a noisy argument between a couple in love. Sierra gets up from the sofa upon hearing Bellietta's voice coming from the balcony, even though she should have been sleeping after getting drunk. In the conversation, an important commitment that Duke Bosbon had apparently made previously is mentioned. And suddenly Sierra realizes that she recognizes Bellietta's second interlocutor, whose voice sounds angry and rough. It turns out to be Arden Rippleton, accusing the Duke of intending to break an old contract because of his daughter. But Bellietta responds defiantly, saying she doesn't give a damn about family commitments, just snorting and crossing her arms over her chest. She is convinced that Bosbon is in a position that allows him to break all previous promises. Unlike the Rippletons, who have nothing but lands full of monsters and dangers, Sierra remembers that in her past life she knew nothing about the existence of this contract and tries not to miss any detail. But she watches with horror how terrifying Bellietta can be when threatening Arden to intimidate him. Rippleton responds by accusing her of madness and stupidity, something it is hard not to agree with. Sierra suspects that this is not at all an argument between lovers, but a tense business debate with high stakes. She wants them to keep talking so she can get more valuable information. However, suddenly the voice of Duke Rippleton is heard behind her, causing Sierra to startle. He ironically reprimands her for eavesdropping on others' conversations, calling her a lady with indecent tastes, which puts her in an awkward situation. She can barely believe that her first conversation with the Duke was so clumsy and unpleasant. She tries to maintain her composure and promises not to flee if Arden moves his hand blocking her way. Faced with his distrust, she calmly replies that she is not foolish enough to get involved in a conflict with the Duke. So Duke Rippleton demands her name, as it is the first time he has seen her, and he cannot recognize her. In response, Sierra performs an elegant curtsy. She introduces herself and pronounces a blessing, which surprises him. The Duke perplexedly points out that a blessing is rare among nobility, but Sierra explains that this is how she wishes them good night. Despite this, Arden indicates that eavesdropping on others' conversations is still inappropriate behavior. Sierra immediately and sincerely apologizes for her inappropriate behavior and inconsiderate. However, the Duke's distrust does not diminish, as he managed to realize that the young woman spent a long time on the balcony. She tries to convince him that, after all, she didn't manage to hear anything important or secret. Sierra explains that she hid when she heard an angry argument between a man and a woman. Recognizing Bellietta as his counterpart, she decided not to intervene in the discussion, fearing the consequences. Although Arden remains distrustful of her, he agrees to listen to the young woman's explanations. Over time, he begins to trust her, allowing Sierra to relax a little and feel relief. Arden, however, reminds her that she must now keep what she heard a secret and behave with dignity. Those words make Sierra laugh nervously, aware of her situation and the warning received. Once in her room, lying on the bed, Sierra cannot calm down because of the events experienced. Although dinner was not particularly exhausting, it left her completely drained anyway. The day was tense, and the events that took place were completely new to her. One of those surprises was the conversation with Arden Rippleton, a man unknown to her until then. Bellietta's argument with that man, in which she openly expressed her opinion, also took Sierra out of her comfort zone. She concludes that she urgently needs more information to understand what is happening. Her parents, who temporarily left the city so their mother could recover her health, give her complete freedom of action. Therefore, Sierra decides to leave her house accompanied by her personal knight and go look for information. She heads to a tavern and, without wasting time, approaches the man who works there. However, her motive has nothing to do with food or drink. She has another, more important matter. The woman leading the guild recognizes her immediately and greets her by name. Sierra tells her she has come to buy valuable information that might be useful to her. Although it is not their main activity, she knows that data is also collected there. The young member of the Thieves Guild feels uneasy and swallows as she looks at her. She tries to assess the visitor with her bravery and firmness, but Sierra does not let herself be provoked. If they refuse to give her the information, she threatens to impose additional taxes on the guild. To avoid that scenario, the guild could offer her an adequate bribe or fulfill her request. Then, the guild representative becomes submissive and tries to elicit what precise information Lady Brilluxen needs. Clearly fearing her status, they take Sierra to the branch manager, who turns out to be the same man who greeted her at the bar. The man seems enormously pleased with her discretion and the way they have organized their meeting. He assures her that he knows perfectly well that Sierra is interested in the relationship between the Bosbon families. And Rippleton, revealing this information, is no difficulty for the guild head. And without beating around the bush, he begins to speak. He begins by saying that many years ago, an arranged marriage contract was signed between these two families. The main goal of the contract was to unite their influence and power to overthrow the ruler. However, one of the families was involved in smuggling, which helped them evade justice. The Bosbons had almost everything, but the only resource that could attract the Rippleton was a scarce one. That resource turned out to be the demonic creatures that the Rippleton actively eradicated. Protecting the empire. The bodies of magical beasts were highly valued in the market, bought by sorcerers, shamans, alchemists, and even common people. However, hunting these creatures was extremely dangerous, and their number, as Sierra points out, was always limited. The guild head adds that very few magical monsters remain nowadays, which has become a problem for the Rippleton. The trade in magical beast bodies was the family's main source of income, which helped maintain their lands. But about 50 years ago, the imperial family surprisingly banned the trade and transportation of magical creatures. Sierra remembers that in her previous life, she read about the introduction of such a law. Afterward, the Rippleton desperately tried to find ways to save their lands. And the only ones who helped were the Bosbons. It was Duke Bosbon who, in a difficult time, extended a hand of help and began to support the hungry lands of the Rippleton. He provided them with various materials in exchange for magical creatures, which required establishing special obligations between the families. These obligations became the commitment between the two families, sealing their alliance. But at that time, the children of both families were already married, and the responsibility fell on the current duke and duchess. Sierra still doesn't understand what motivated them to take such a risk for magical creatures. The guild head says there are rumors circulating that the Duke of Bosbon is secretly supporting sorcerers for his own interests. However, he immediately clarified that they are only rumors and should not be trusted without confirmation. After those words, Sierra's curiosity was completely extinguished, and she decided to leave the guild. She headed to the nearest cafe to meet Goulet, who was already waiting for her there. Goulet is obviously annoyed that Sierra cannot concentrate despite her presence, and only thinks about her own things. Smiling nervously, Sierra thinks that Goulet thinks too highly of herself and always expects excessive attention. Owlet mentions that instead of going personally to the island for the stone, she delegated it to someone else. Sierra is dissatisfied, as she wanted Owlet to leave the city personally, not just delegate the mission. Owlet is sure there is nothing wrong with it, as orders can be given to others. She adds that she doesn't have to do the hard work herself when she has subordinates for that. Sierra cannot convince her friend otherwise, as Owlet just smiles and cuts off the conversation. Gradually, Sierra begins to notice how Owlet has changed and discovers her true face. If something does not go according to her plan, Owlet becomes dominant and starts pressuring those who treated her kindly before. Talking to Bellietta exhausts Sierra, as she is tired of her behavior and would like her to leave soon so she can rest. Bellietta ignores her friend's annoyance and continues to watch her attentively with a smile, as if trying to guess her mood. Moreover, she asks if Sierra knows that the Marquis of Bellietta will organize a banquet next month. clearly eager to share that news with her. That banquet is intended for young aristocrats of all ranks, and Bellietta considers it wonderful news, asking if Sierra plans to attend. However, Sierra replies that the banquet is completely indifferent to her and that events like that do not appeal to her. This answer leaves Bellietta completely surprised, as she was sure Sierra liked the Marquis. Considering her reaction at the last banquet, Bellietta believes that at the last banquet Sierra changed upon seeing the Marquis and always thought her friend had sympathy for him. But Sierra denies any sympathy, reflecting that perhaps in another life she felt something for the Marquis. But now his mere presence causes her disgust. Bellietta falls silent, but her gaze darkens with irritation, and she asks a direct question. Is Sierra hiding something important from her that they should discuss? Mrs. Bosbon crosses her arms over her chest, as if demanding an immediate answer, and expecting Sierra to share her thoughts on what happened. Sierra answers her friend with the same look and directly states that her friend is also hiding important things from her, causing her discomfort. This reaction makes Bellietta uncomfortable, as she was not prepared for this turn of events. Nor did she expect such a response from Sierra. Sierra reminds her friend of an event from the day before yesterday, which Bellietta ignored despite its importance. Sierra begins to pressure her friend, forcing her to admit if she remembers what happened, or if she is simply lying, hiding the truth. Then Sierra directly asks if Bellietta has a fiancé she hasn't told her about, and her friend's face immediately turns cold and sullen. Although Bellietta tried to scoff, claiming she didn't understand what it was about, Sierra is sure her voice was full of anger when denying her obligations to her parents. Julieta apologizes, saying she got so drunk that she doesn't remember the conversation, trying to avoid further questions. In any case, Sierra is surprised by the news of the fiancé and doesn't understand why her friend didn't tell her sooner. Since it's an important topic, perhaps Julieta had reasons to remain silent, but Sierra feels hurt because she considered them close friends and expected more trust. Before, Sierra hadn't noticed that they had drifted apart, and now this realization causes her pain and confusion. Those words impact Julieta, who stands up to deny them, but Sierra interrupts her, giving her no opportunity to justify herself. Sierra says she has urgent matters and asks her friend to leave immediately, not wanting to continue that conversation. Then, she turns around and walks away without heeding Julieta's shouts, as if she had nothing more to say. Bidding farewell courteously, Sierra says they will see each other again, but her words lack warmth, like a farewell without a promise. Julieta is surprised by the behavior of a Sierra who was obedient before and quiet, as she didn't expect her to act so harshly and decisively. Sierra, sitting in her office and reflecting on the information received, suddenly remembers the rumors she heard in the guild. The rumors had been precisely about the daughter of Duke Bosbon and confirmed something Sierra already suspected about that family's intentions. She learned that Mrs. Bosbon was strongly opposed to the contract between their families, which endangered mutual exchange and trade. That is why the supply agreement that was to be sent to the Rippletons was suspended for several years, which had serious consequences for everyone. Sierra begins to question whether the bond between families had broken, and concludes that it is very likely if the Bosbon family does not change its stance. The guild head asks Sierra not to disclose the information about the origin of these rumors, as it could cause unnecessary consequences for his organization. He also asks her not to raise taxes because, due to difficult times, the guild is already going through financial difficulties. Sierra ponders the guild master's words and understands that she has an opportunity for revenge, and she doesn't plan to waste it. Later, in her office, busy with paperwork, Sierra receives an unexpected visit from the family's head butler, who comes with an important request. The butler informs her that he has a request that is very important to him, and that Sierra must listen to him attentively. It turns out that Sierra urgently needs various necessities, including food, luxury items, alcohol, clothing, and medicine. Furthermore, the volume must be sufficient to supply 500,000 people for an entire year. The butler cannot believe what he hears. He is completely surprised. He asks again, this time to clarify exactly how many people are mentioned, to be sure of what was said. But Sierra confirms that it is indeed 500,000 people, and there is no mistake. She adds that all these items must be sent to the lands of the Rippleton family, which is their next destination. The butler understands that the scarcity situation is truly serious, and that they have a great need for those items. Sierra asks that the matter of the deliveries be resolved as soon as possible and without delays. Otherwise, the consequences will be serious. The butler promises that, within 3 days, all necessary items will be sent to Arden's lands, as the situation demands. A short time later, Sierra organizes a trip to the lands where her new Diana resides to participate in the process personally. At one point, she sticks her head out the carriage window, but she is immediately warned that it might cause a cold in the current weather. The knight warns that, in good, whether the journey would take no more than half a day. But now everything is much more complicated. However, due to the rain, the horses and people are tired, and now the journey will take much longer than expected. Due to the rain, the noises have disappeared, but conversely, the smells have dissipated, which means they will move more safely through the forest, where they might encounter monsters. The knight laughs and jokes that monsters don't care how well protected humans are, because they see them as a tempting snack anyway. Sierra is perplexed by his light attitude towards such disturbing matters, as if they were trivialities. The knight, however, strongly recommends that Sierra close the windows so she doesn't catch a cold until they reach their destination. The young woman follows the advice, closes the windows, and decides to rest in the carriage while they travel towards the Rippleton lands. Continuing their journey, she thinks she had never imagined undertaking an adventure against Bellietta. Nor could she imagine that something like this could happen. However, this time she doesn't want to lose, because her mission is to win and she cannot afford to lose. Her goal is to make her former friend, whom she now considers her rival, lose. Despite all the obstacles, they managed not to encounter any monsters along the way. And when they crossed half the mountain, the rain subsided, so they arrived on time. Sierra was satisfied to have finally reached the Rippleton lands, and eagerly awaited the meeting. She approaches the knight riding next to the carriage and asks if it is true that they have already arrived at the Rippleton lands. The knight replies that he has been here many times and can state with certainty that these lands have not changed. They are exactly the same. Sierra is surprised by the appearance of the land that was spoken of so much, and that was considered almost abandoned in the empire. There is much more activity here. People are smiling and look happy, unlike the descriptions of these lands as completely abandoned in the empire. Although basic necessities are often lacking in these lands, this happy world is the result of the Ripple's hard work so that the people in their territory can live happily. They finally arrive at the location, and the knight helps Sierra down from the cart, accompanying her to the next stop. She examines the Ripple's castle with interest, unable to take her eyes off its imposing appearance. The castle is truly very tall and majestic. It gives the impression of a tower rising to the sky. It was the first time she had seen a castle in person, as until now she had only seen it in pictures and descriptions. It even gives her the impression that this castle is even bigger than the imperial palace itself. That's how big and imposing it is. The butler approaches Sierra, greets her politely, and thanks her for the decision to visit their lands. Sierra apologizes for the unexpected visit, but agrees to accompany the butler inside the castle to discuss important matters. The butler suggests taking her to the head of the family so she can meet with that important person immediately. Although the exterior of the castle is majestic, the interior turns out to be quite simple. And there are not even paintings in the lobby, which surprises Sierra. Sierra also notices that there is clearly less staff than in other places, which catches her attention. Finally, they reach the indicated place, and the butler suggests that Sierra enter the office, where an important meeting awaits her. Sierra feels nervous, as an important task that can influence her future lies before her, and she is ready to act. She enters the office, where Arden Ripple is already waiting for her and prepares for a serious conversation. Turning towards the young woman, Arden tells her that she has made a long journey and finally greets her. Looking away from the window, he is surprised that it took her so long and asks about her journey. The girl bows politely in a curtsy, greeting the man in front of her. With graceful movements and an expression of respect, she pronounces the greeting quietly but clearly, emphasizing her deference. She assures him that it is an honor for her to have finally met Rippleton, especially since it is her first formal meeting. Sierra feels an emotion carried by the expectation of that moment. Arden tells her to sit down and immediately asks the butler and servants to leave the room, leaving them alone to talk. He wants to discuss matters with her without witnesses, avoiding unwanted ears. He approaches the window and looks with surprise at the 8 carts with supplies that have arrived at the castle. They contain wheat, medicine, clothing, liquor, and other luxuries, which clearly impresses him. Then he returns to the young woman and sits opposite her on the sofa, intently observing her reaction. He slightly furrows his brow. His attention could not help but notice this unexpected action. She waits impatiently for the man to ask about the reasons for the unexpected visit. But Arden surprises her with a question about what tea she likes. She did not expect this. However, instead of asking about the contents of the carts, Rippleton unexpectedly asks about her tea preference. This bewilders Sierra, as she does not understand the connection to the current events. This completely baffles her, as she expected a different question, and her mind stalls for a moment. Not knowing how to react, she did not expect the meeting to start with such a strange question. She politely declines tea, explaining that she does not understand the reason for the question and does not want to distract him from an important topic. Her face remains calm, but her eyes reveal slight bewilderment. Only then does Arden finally ask her what is in those carts and why she suddenly came with those offerings. He looks at her, awaiting explanations. Sierra replies that they are gifts and hopes he likes them, trusting in benevolence. She is sure they can be useful and hopes his family appreciates her gesture. The man is surprised, but not disappointed, as these things could be very practical at home. He understands that the gift is not a casual act, but a thoughtful gesture. Sierra apologizes for the misunderstanding at the party and proposes accepting the goods without suspicion. Her apologies are sincere, and she hopes this will help ease the tension. Arden immediately latches onto those words, pointing out that he heard nothing at the party, and waits interestedly for explanations. His gaze becomes sharper, as if trying to decipher her true intentions. Sierra thinks that at that moment it would have been better to pretend than to reveal all her cards. But now that the situation is clearer, she is willing to apologize sincerely and explain her actions. It is still unclear why she tries to recall that day, which could have remained in the past. But now she cannot help it, as everything intertwines with her current intentions. Lady Brillackson believes that she can gain benefits by associating with the Rippleton family. That is why she made this decision, trying to establish contacts for her own interest and future. The Duke's gaze changes, becoming cold, and he asks what business the young woman proposes to him. His tone becomes more serious, and he will not waste time on empty conversations. She states that the Rippleton family has not received help from the Bosbons for some time and knows the specific terms of the agreement between both families. She shares important information, hoping for his support. She gets up from the sofa and approaches Arden, telling him she wants him to become her husband, offering him not only help, but also a mutually beneficial collaboration. This proposal turns out to be unexpected and bold. She made a proposal that she definitely did not plan in her previous life, as she never imagined having to ask that man for this kind of help. It was unexpected even to herself. However, Rippleton does not understand her intentions and seems confused, as the proposal was too direct and unexpected for him. He is unsure how to react to her words. Sierra proposes signing a contract because she is interested in the possible enmity between his family and the Bosbons, and sees this as an opportunity to use their resources for her own benefit. If problems arise with the contract, the Rippleton's position could become unstable, which could have a significant impact on their affairs and relationships with other families. Sierra understands that it is a dangerous game. That is why she tried to convince Valette to avoid possible inconveniences and maintain stability. But it seems everything turned out differently than she planned. And Sierra can guarantee the supply of items in their place, expecting to assume responsibility and become a decisive factor in their relations. Arden is very interested in why his guest needs this and decides to discover her true motives. His interest grows as he senses she is hiding something important. She first tries to joke, asking if it matters, but her laugh seems a bit forced, since she understands it is an important question. However, he agrees to supply the Rippleton with the necessary resources annually, but only if she becomes his man and chooses him, even if someone else offers her a tempting proposal. If he swears to be loyal to Sierra when she needs him, that will be enough, and he will keep his word regardless of the circumstances. The man hands her a letter from the Bosbon clan, which contains important details about their relations and the proposals the family wants to discuss with her. Sierra unfolds the letter to read it carefully and begins to examine it, trying to understand what they want from her in this situation. The letter mentions that they cannot fulfill the contract terms, so they wish to postpone it or cancel it, putting her in a difficult situation that requires a decision that will affect her future. Duke Bosbon loves his daughter so much that he cannot contradict her wish, despite the difficulties his family faces. And he is willing to support her in any decision. And because of this noble love, the Rippleton clan has had to beg for charity from several families for the past 5 years, which affected their status and further complicated decisions. Sierra is furious to see that millions are starving, and the Bosbon clan doesn't care, as they only think about their own well-being and not about the needs of others. At that moment, Rippleton understands that Sierra despises them, and this discovery deeply affects him, since he always tried to justify their actions. Then they walk through the castle, and Arden offers to prepare dinner if she is hungry, trying to show attention and care, but she seems uninterested in eating. She thanks him and says she is not hungry, understanding that it is not the best time to talk about food, since her thoughts are occupied by other matters. Then she blushes under the man's attentive gaze, who examines her and starts to feel uncomfortable, as his eyes seem to penetrate her most intimate thoughts. It turns out that he thought she refused dinner because she watches her figure, which makes Sierra feel embarrassed, although her decision was completely different. However, Sierra really doesn't want to eat right now, so there is nothing to worry about, since her refusal of food is not due to her image, but her internal state. Arden exhales in relief, and they continue their quiet walk through the castle, exchanging few words, but warm ones, enjoying the moment of silence. Sierra decides to ask why there are so few staff in the castle, something evident from the start. And it seems strange to her that such a large residence can function with such limited staff. Of course, the reason is a simple lack of budget. And although this explanation is logical, it perplexes Sierra, as she believes the situation could have been corrected. The young woman is surprised by how poorly they manage finances, that even the Duke openly mentions the need to reduce staff, showing their vulnerability and openness. Sierra suggests hiring more employees, but Arden decides that, for now, it is not the priority, since there are more urgent problems that must be resolved first, although not entirely satisfactory for her proposals. First, certain areas of the castle need to be repaired, as the condition of some rooms is deplorable, and their restoration must take priority. Sierra understands that, for a family with economic limitations, repairing and maintaining this place is complicated, and constant cuts affect the quality of life and productivity of everyone. However, she believes that with her help they will be able to hire more staff and solve the main tasks, since her way of organizing and acting could considerably improve the current situation. But then, with a smile, Rippleton comments that she is already acting like a housewife, highlighting how involved she is in the process, despite her doubts. This embarrasses her, as she did not expect her actions to be interpreted as if she already had complete control of the household. It is a deep-rooted habit, because at home she always interrogates the butler during reports. And she finds it hard to shake off that instinct, even in a new place and with a different role. Although Rippleton finds it amusing, this attitude intrigues him. He did not imagine that the lady would be so interested in this hostile territory and its problems. He takes her to a room they usually keep in good condition and explains that it is ideal for her to rest, since she always takes meticulous care of herself. That should be enough, but just in case, he will assign a maid to guarantee her necessary comfort, in case she requires additional services. The young woman thanks him and asks that no one else be assigned to her, as she has her own servant who can attend to her and provide her with everything she needs. Then Arden wishes her good night, responding to her pleas and making an effort to be courteous, although his words maintain a formal tone. Sierra demands that he call her by her name, as she does not want to be an anonymous figure in this house. And for her, establishing closer and more natural communication is crucial. She smiles at him more warmly and grants his request, showing that he respects her wishes. And he is willing to get closer, so that communication between them is easier and natural. Later, in her room, Sierra reflects on how in the previous promise with Leighton, her parents were very worried, as they could not make decisions based only on their emotions. They asked her to reconsider if that man truly loved her, as his love and care for their daughter made them doubt her choices. Perhaps the same will happen this time, as she knows her parents will not change their view of her future husband just for formal circumstances. The city she plans to move to with her husband has a bad reputation in the empire, so it is likely that her parents will continue to doubt the validity of her choice. She is interested in knowing what emotions her new engagement will provoke in them, especially the marriage contract, since she understands it could be a decisive point for her family. While talking in the office, they discuss that the contract is not based on feelings, but on both using each other, highlighting the cynical attitude of their agreement. Arden tries to find out how Sierra will behave if Duke Bosbon finds out about her engagement. It has not been annulled, which could cause additional complications. Sierra thinks the Duke only needs to declare that Bosbon delayed fulfilling the agreement for 5 years, and his letter would be an official notification to annul it. This makes Rippleton reflect, but he accepts, considering that they will act this way, as it would be a logical step in their complicated situation. Sierra replies that there is something she must do, something that does not depend on her appearance or how well she fulfills her obligations, but on a more important step. That is becoming the most attractive man of all, attracting not only by his appearance, but also by his inner strength, charisma, and confidence to overcome any obstacle. The most important thing is not to fall in love with Lady Bosbon, as her manipulations could influence his fate. So they must not be the cause of his feelings. Otherwise, everything will be in danger. Because as soon as she finds out about their relationship, she will become interested in him. She will start interfering in their bond and manipulating him, creating additional problems for both, and calling their next steps into question. Sierra is sure that Bellietta will want to get her fiancé back just to annoy her, and do everything possible for Rippleton to lose everything he has gained, without having real reasons for it. Rippleton understands that, at least, the cause of this contract is closely related to Bellietta, and perhaps it is the only means to avoid further manipulations and keep the situation under control. However, in that case, she definitely shouldn't worry, as Bellietta has lost her power and influence, and she will no longer be able to affect their relationship as before. Bellietta is a woman who abandoned her territory without compassion when it was in difficulty, and her actions only reinforce her true face, full of selfishness and cruelty towards those who no longer serve her. The flower of society, whom everyone presents as an angel, has fallen from grace before Duke Rippleton. And for Sierra, it is a great opportunity, as she can now take advantage of this situation in her favor to strengthen her position. However, Arden tries to find out if Sierra has an inferiority complex because of her friend. Perhaps because she has to compete with women who possess more influence and strength than her. One of them behaves like a rude pig, showing all her antipathy and arrogance, while the other seems quite tolerable and calm, despite her strength and confidence in her actions. Sierra only hopes that she is not the one who corresponds to the pig, as she does not want to be perceived as repulsive. Although deep down she knows that sometimes it is difficult to control the perception of others. In response, Rippleton only jokes, as he does not want to touch on overly serious topics, knowing that they could cause unpleasant emotions, and tries to ease the tension with a joke. It is time to sign the contract, and the atmosphere feels tense, as this moment is crucial for their future. And both know that much depends on the decision they make. Sierra quotes a politician, which surprises Arden because she is so sure of her words, and knows how to use others' ideas to reinforce her own positions, which makes him reflect. Sierra explains that it is fundamental to build trust before making serious decisions, since without mutual respect and honesty, any agreement would be empty and would not bring the desired results. Rippleton examines the contract that Sierra drafted, and although he notes that many points need adjustments, he understands that this document has great relevance for their future relationship. He realizes that the amount of compensation is slightly exaggerated, and perhaps this could become a cause for future conflicts, since demands that are too high usually generate dissatisfaction. However, Sierra believes that it must be high enough to prevent betrayals, since only then can she ensure the seriousness of the Rippletons' intentions and their willingness to fulfill the conditions. If the Rippleton betray her, they will become complete bankrupts, as this agreement is their last chance to avoid financial collapse and maintain their reputation, which adds gravity to these negotiations. Of course, it is a completely unfavorable condition for Arden, and he understands that these conditions can put him in a difficult situation. But perhaps it is the only way to guarantee long-term stability. The girl laughs that he is already planning to betray her, even though they haven't even started working. And this moment makes them both feel a little less tension, despite the seriousness of the situation. She chose that amount carefully after the betrayal of her ex-husband, who destroyed everything they had built. And now she counts every move carefully so as not to repeat past mistakes. Arden finishes reading the contract with unease, knowing that it contains much that could change his future. And his heart begins to beat faster, as much depends on his decision. After all, he is responsible for his lands, and it all comes down to money. And this moment becomes especially crucial, as not only personal interests are at stake, but also the future of his family and their territory. But then he calmly signs the documents and hands them over to the woman, understanding that it is a step he must take. And he cannot afford to doubt the validity of his decision. She receives them and sees that he signed everything, feeling that everything finally reached a logical conclusion. And now their relationship advances to a new level, where everything will depend on their actions. She also returns his copy, making sure that all formalities are met and the necessary signatures are made, and then she feels relief, as if she had finished an important stage of her plan. Everything happened so fast that Rippleton understands that he has acquired a woman who is anything but simple. And she has clearly thought out every detail, which earns him respect and admiration for her determination. This makes Sierra laugh, as her plan has finally been set in motion. And she understands that now, after signing the contract, challenges will come and she is ready to face them. For the first time, she acted on her own, without thinking about Bellietta. And this independence gives her the confidence that she can overcome any obstacle, even if she has to face everyone. She is sure that Bellietta will react, perhaps with fury or envy, as her jealousy and desire to control everything related to Rippleton could become a serious threat to Sierra. No matter how she reacts, Sierra will be immensely pleased to know that her actions did not go unnoticed, and that she managed to accomplish what was necessary to move forward. This small step initiates her grand plan, which she believes will unfold in her favor. And now, after signing the contract, she feels certain that everything is progressing as planned. 4 days later, Sierra returns home and bathes, reflecting on everything that has happened. Aware that this moment was an important transition on her path to achieving her goals. The maid, noticing the changes in the young woman's mood, asks if something good has happened to her, since lately she seems happier and more energetic than usual. The young woman replies that perhaps her good mood is due to the fact that she has been waiting a long time for the moment to set her carefully crafted plan in motion. However, before she can continue thinking, her attention is interrupted by a voice in the main hall, which breaks her tranquility and forces her to focus on what is happening around her. Upon arriving in the room, she discovers that it is Bellietta who has come to her house and must prepare to receive her friend, since the visit is clearly important and requires special attention. Sierra approaches her friend and, a little surprised, asks what brought her to the house without warning, since normally such visits were coordinated in advance and did not happen without preparation. Bellietta is sitting on the sofa with a clear expression of displeasure. Her hands crossed, and her gaze indicates that she expects Sierra to give her explanations immediately. In her opinion, she asks Sierra directly if she lied to her about the necklace, by claiming that a certain stone was only found on a specific island. But it turns out that there are no such stones on that island. Sierra replies that this stone is really rare and that she herself was supposed to go. However, if she had sent someone else, they would probably have pretended not to know anything. Bellietta, despite the explanation, is convinced that no one in her circle, much less her close ones, would lie to her family. And she cannot believe that someone dares to lie about such an important matter. However, Sierra remains calm and acts as if she does not understand what it is about, trying not to show interest in the conversation, as if it were the first time she heard about that stone. While calmly sipping a cup of tea, she tries to hide her restlessness and continues to behave as if the situation does not affect her, with her mind occupied with other things. Then, she states that she indeed received that information, but at the moment, she has no further details to clarify the situation. And that is where her knowledge ends. She clarifies that she obtained that information from her master Ezequiel Ross, who, according to her, was the source of that data. And he told her everything she can now convey. Bellietta, after clarifying, asks Sierra again if that man told her those exact words, since she cannot believe what she hears and wants to make sure the information is not false. Sierra, noticing that the conversation is taking an interesting turn, begins to perform a comedy, pretending to feel very bad for accidentally deceiving her friend. But of course, it is all an act. Bellietta, sighing and realizing that she cannot change anything now, accepts having been deceived, and begins to understand that her plans will no longer be as she expected. Fortunately, Bellietta does not yet know that in this necklace, there are gems even more valuable than, in her view, should have been included in her investigation. But for now, she has not discovered this important detail. So, Sierra decides to entertain her friend a little and arouse her curiosity, prolonging the dialogue to keep her in suspense and observe her reaction to what is coming. She addresses Bellietta and announces that she has a special piece of news she has wanted to share for a long time, but always postponed it, as the information is personal and generates certain emotions in her. She admits that the news makes her a little nervous, and she is unsure how her friend will receive it, since such matters are usually discussed in very close relationships, not publicly. The girl reveals that she has recently become interested in a man, and this news makes her blush a little, as she is not used to sharing such feelings with other people, especially friends. This news puts Bellietta in a state of great excitement. Her hands begin to tremble slightly with excitement, and she is very interested, as such a confession from Sierra is an unexpected event for her, and significant. However, Sierra believes that for Bellietta, this man is still light, and she will not be able to see him as someone different, even though she herself is ready to change her perception. Bellietta, without hiding her curiosity, tries to find out more about who this man is. Her eyes shine with interest, and she cannot wait for Sierra to tell her everything. But Sierra maintains a mysterious air, replying that she knows the man. but is not yet ready to reveal details, as she herself is not completely sure of her feelings and does not want to share them prematurely. Her friend, upset by having a new secret, shows her displeasure, as she was always open and shared everything with Sierra. Now she feels distant and deprived of important information. Sierra, understanding that her friend is sad, explains that she is simply not sure of her feelings towards that man and needs more time to clarify her emotions before talking about them. Bellietta continues to pressure her friend, trying to extract more, but Sierra remains firm, affirming that she will tell when she is ready and that for now she needs time to reflect. Sierra's face darkens, her gaze becomes more determined, and she feels a surge of tension, as she does not like hiding her thoughts, but still does not reveal everything. However, this time Sierra decides to take control of the situation and announces that, despite being close friends, there is a limit they must not cross, or their relationship could end up hurt. Sierra feels a bit tired and must ask Bellietta to leave her house, explaining that she needs time alone and to rest after this tense conversation that is beginning to exhaust her. Bellietta, putting her mask back on, agrees to leave the house, although her face still reflects displeasure, and a certain wound is perceptible in her eyes from having been asked to leave. After Bellietta leaves, Sierra remains alone, and the maid, a little shy, asks her if she was too harsh with her friend, since she clearly expected more from their meeting. Sierra, looking at the maid with surprise, replies that her behavior was perfectly justified, and that her decision to leave her friend without further explanation does not seem excessively severe to her. The maid, realizing she said too much, begins to apologize for her words, although she maintains the opinion that as a friend, Sierra could have responded more openly to the question that so troubled her friend. This reaction from Sierra is useful, as it allows her to avoid excessive attention on her actions, which could arouse suspicion and complicate her next steps. She does not want to arouse suspicion so soon, as that could jeopardize her plans and force her to act with less freedom than she would like. Her relationship with Arden is still unstable, which generates uncertainty in her actions, requiring greater attention and caution on her part. In order not to generate new rumors, she cannot reject Bellietta so abruptly without reason, since that would immediately become a topic of conversation and could damage her reputation. Therefore, she must establish clear rules on how she will behave with Bellietta and act quickly to eliminate the people she sent to the estate, minimizing the impact of these events. Meanwhile, on the Rippleton property, people are distributing the supplies from the Brillaxon family, generating some tension and importance in these events, which will influence the future of the region. Rippleton observes this from the window, assessing what is happening and trying to understand what it means for him and his future actions in the current situation. There is a lot of activity in the castle, and people are actively preparing for an important event, which generates an atmosphere of tension and hustle in the place. Ardn's secretary approaches him and tells him that all this is thanks to the things Sierra brought, which underscores her importance in current events. He conducted an investigation commissioned by Arden and has now come to report to him, presenting details that could alter the course of future events. He studied, of course, Sierra and her family, and concluded that, despite their wealth, they remain pure and without political connections, which gives them a more advantageous position. Their influence is especially manifested in the extraction of stones and mana, unique resources of the mountain range they control, which gives them a powerful advantage in that business. Therefore, the Mages Association informally protects them, which consolidates their position and provides them with additional resources to defend their interests. Furthermore, the relationship between Bellietta and Sierra is perceived as that of friends, which allows them to maintain control and avoid excessive attention. Since childhood, Sierra helped Bellietta, who, thanks to that contact, began to feel secure and change, thus affecting their relationship. Over time, they became too similar, both in appearance and in the way they acted, which attracted attention and generated rumors. They wore similar dresses and shoes, identical hairstyles, and the rumors turned against them. causing doubts among those around them. Arden believes she is not someone who imitates others, and this is important to him, as it makes her a more independent person. And autonomous. Before the rumors, they described her as brave and active, which helped her maintain respect. And act with confidence. He understands that his question about the inferiority complex might have deeply hurt her. So now he must apologize or clarify his intentions. However, new rumors are now circulating that directly affect him and his reputation, becoming a key factor in their future relationship. These rumors touch upon a critical issue that could influence Arden's political future and his relationships with others. Specifically, it is claimed that Arden plans a political marriage with the Bosbon family, generating questions among those observing him. These rumors reach Sierra, who is horrified to realize they could ruin her plans and destroy everything she built with effort. She asks a maid who is marrying whom, and the maid replies that it is Lady Bellietta and Rippleton, which confuses her even more. Rumors about their political marriage appeared, and Sierra does not understand why they are starting to spread now, when her own plan was finally beginning to materialize. She asks the maid where she heard it, and it turns out the rumors spread through another maid, which further complicates the situation. Sierra is very upset by the emergence of these rumors, as they could damage her reputation and ruin her carefully crafted plans. She tells the girl to leave her alone to clarify what is happening and make a decision that allows her to control the situation. She thinks perhaps Bellietta is intentionally spreading these rumors, but cannot understand what her goal is or what she is trying to achieve with it. Perhaps it is that she doesn't want to leave Rippleton only for him, but she also doesn't want someone else to take him, since that way she would lose her uniqueness and value, and all her effort would be in vain. There is also the possibility that the Duke deliberately orchestrated this rumor to generate interest in the situation and see how those involved react. Which side will they take? Similar rumors will end up unsettling the Bosbons, forcing them to intervene. And she will have to be much more careful not to get dragged into an even more dangerous game than she expected. Time passes, and since Arden sends no reply, Sierra decides she must act. And she heads to the ball, hoping to find useful information there to understand what is happening. He had enough time to decide and communicate it, and perhaps he changed his mind about their future marriage and relationship, but the answer never came. Sierra decides that if he breaks the agreement or tries to deceive her in some way, she will not wait for him and will look for a way to punish him herself, even if she has to break his hand to regain control. She allows the gentleman to help her out of the carriage without protesting, as she understands it is a rather common action, although she feels she needs to lean on others to maintain control. Thus she arrives at the Bellietta Palace, where a grand banquet will soon be held, which she decides to attend to gather information and discover what rumors are circulating in those circles. Although she had told Bellietta she would not attend that party, now that she realizes she lacks information about the rumors, she decides her presence there will be indispensable. Bellietta also wonders if her love interest will attend the ball, and Sierra is intrigued by how this will affect their future relationship and what will happen if she really shows up. Sierra enters the ballroom and attracts general attention, as all eyes immediately turn towards her, and realizes she is the center of attention, something that is not always appropriate in this situation. Someone among the guests calls her, and turning around, she immediately notices that it is Bellietta, who appears with a smile on her face, instantly creating a warmer atmosphere in the room. Of course it is Bellietta, who is wearing a dress very similar to the one Sierra chose, which immediately draws the attention of those present, and makes many wonder if it could be a coincidence in taste. Bellietta approaches her happily and tells her she is delighted to see her friend at this party, expressing genuine emotion that slightly eases the atmosphere. Meanwhile, Lit approaches them and with a polite greeting addresses Lady Brillaxon, evidently trying to make a pleasant first impression. The Marquis of Bellietta continues to evoke unpleasant memories in Sierra and his presence. Despite his apparent courtesy, reminds her of the old resentment that has not disappeared since their relationship ended. However, Sierra puts on a mask of courtesy and thanks him for the invitation to the party. Understanding that this gathering demands her polite behavior, despite her internal discomfort. Later, standing in the hall with a drink in hand, she enjoys the drink while immersing herself in reflection, processing the events of the previous days in her mind and considering how to act. The Marquis of Bellietta, her ex-husband, takes the opportunity to flirt with Bellietta, who, in turn, tries to divert the conversation by saying she drank too much at the last dinner. Trying to avoid a direct exchange, Sierra feels annoyed by the situation, as she has to listen to empty talk, and perceives that this prevents her from concentrating on more important matters that require her attention. Because Bellietta does not leave her side for a moment, Sierra cannot hear the rumors being discussed in the hall, since she is always in conversation and cannot take advantage of moments to observe. She also notices that she does not see her man anywhere, which causes her unease and lack of security, as she expected to find him there. Suddenly, as if planned, Bellietta announces that she will be back soon. And Sierra understands that her friend is clearly trying to leave her alone, perhaps to talk or do something. Sierra, who hasn't paid attention to the conversation, doesn't know exactly where Bellietta went, and feels a certain confusion about her friend's decision to leave her alone. At that moment, Litton tries again to get her attention, coming closer and starting a conversation, which forces Sierra to listen reluctantly, despite her desire to focus on other things. He approaches closer, explaining that they haven't spoken since the greeting, and starts with compliments, trying to establish closer contact and arouse interest in himself. Sierra asks him directly if he liked the conversation with Bellietta, showing curiosity about his opinion, and trying to understand what he really thinks about what is happening. Litton, laughing nervously, replies that both conversations were very pleasant for him, and expresses his joy in talking to both her and her friend, hoping his words impress Sierra. Despite his efforts, Sierra pays little attention to him, as she is focused on watching the dancers and reflecting on what is happening in the hall. She continues watching those dancing, and then notices that Bellietta has not yet entered the dance floor, and suggests to the Marquis that he dance the first piece with her, to at least slightly change the atmosphere around them. At that moment, as Sierra is immersed in her thoughts, her friend Bellietta returns, with something important on her mind, and, looking at her companion, announces that she has resolved the pending matters she had. As soon as Bellietta returns, the Marquis of Bellietta immediately approaches her with a smile, expressing his desire to dance, not wanting to miss the opportunity to spend a few minutes with her on the floor. Embarrassed and somewhat disoriented, Bellietta realizes that her plan did not fully work and, upon seeing her friend, she acknowledges that she has no choice but to accept the situation, since Sierra, with a smile, asks her to go and dance. Soon, the couple heads to the center of the hall, where couples are already dancing happily, creating a festive atmosphere, and with each step they blend more with the group. Meanwhile, Mrs. Bree Luxon, standing on the balcony and observing the scene, remembers how everything was in the past, when these parties seemed different to her, and certain moments were linked to deeper emotions. These memories impact her again, surprising her and causing her pain, as if reliving what happened years ago, unable to break free from those traumatic images. Despite the suffering, Sierra tries not to think about what happened those days, forcing herself to move on. But the pain returns every time and does not leave her in peace. Moving away from everything that is happening, she decides that the best thing will be to go out for some fresh air, far from the hustle and bustle and the bright lights of the party, to calm her thoughts. She feels the need to breathe fresh air to clear her mind of accumulated emotions, and decides that the balcony will be her temporary refuge from the chaos of the night. However, as she passes by one of the doors, she begins to overhear conversations about the imminent union between Lady Bosbon and Duke Rippleton, and these rumors capture her attention, generating a strange restlessness. In the end, no matter how much she tried to avoid rumors, news about their engagement was inevitable. And she understands that, perhaps, it is only a matter of time before this whole situation becomes reality. These rumors become increasingly uncomfortable with every passing moment. Their intensity grows, and with it, her irritation, which in turn hurts her personally. She recalls the moment when it was first mentioned that she supposedly imitated Bellietta. Even though it was the other way around, as she was trying to be herself, but no one believed her words. Sierra feels humiliated and considered pathetic, as many believed she was just copying behaviors and tastes of others, and that feeling stayed with her for a long time. In her eyes, everything still seems dark and dirty, and she finds it difficult to shake off the idea that her life has not yet left behind the wounds of the past, when she could not enjoy real freedom. Trying to maintain an appearance of calm and self-control, she pretends the rumors do not affect her at all. But deep down, they hurt her deeply. However, at that moment someone appears who, apparently, cannot leave her alone. But at the same time, decides not to worry about the rumors, calling them absurd shouts, and urging her not to waste her energy on nonsense. He insists that she should not take such gossip so seriously, as they are just words not worth listening to, and she should not allow them to influence her inner world. Of course, it turns out to be Duke Arden Ripton, who suddenly appears at the party. And his words about the rumors not only reassure her, but also give her the certainty of not wasting time on insignificant details. Sierra feels great relief, realizing that Duke Ripton did attend the party, as her soul is filled with peace, and the inner voice that tormented her goes quiet. As soon as Arden is by her side, all her worries cease immediately, and she experiences deep tranquility, perceiving how her doubts and fears disappear suddenly. However, despite her relief, she cannot avoid a sincere comment saying that his dramatic entrance, typical of a novelistic protagonist, does not fit his style, trying to hide her emotions. Duke Ripton, smiling, apologizes, explaining that he had to resolve some matters before joining the party, and expresses his regret for not having contacted her earlier. He explains that problems with the carrier pigeon were the cause of his silence, and that due to the threat to the birds, he could not send a message in time, which worries Sierra, as she was unaware of such a complication. The carrier pigeon, upon not reaching Ripton, found itself in danger, since if those birds appeared in the sky, they could easily become prey for monsters, which embarrasses her for having ignored until then. The girl feels ashamed because she didn't know about that and feels some discomfort, since it sounds like an excuse she now has to live with, even if it seems a bit strange to her. After this explanation, Arden invites Sierra to dance, hoping this gesture will help her forget the details for a moment, and the tension accumulated during the evening. Sierra still feels self-conscious about this proposal, as she believes dancing would generate new rumors that others would comment on. While she needs to focus on what to do with Bosbon, Arden replies with a smile that she bravely wanted to belong to him. But now she is uneasy about some rumors, putting her in an awkward situation. Although he continues the conversation, he keeps saying that dancing with someone at a party is not scandalous, and her worries about possible rumors seem excessive, calling her a coward, which makes her reflect on his words. He continues offering his hand, inviting her to dance, showing his determination, and convincing her that this moment is not for doubting or losing the opportunity to enjoy it. The girl doesn't understand why Arden insists so firmly on dancing, as she is still unsure which side he is taking, and if the rumors about Bellietta and him were spread precisely by them. She fears being betrayed again, as in her previous life, and cannot shake off the fear that, like before, her hopes will end in vain and lead her to disappointment. Arden notices her unease and sighs, shaking his head, as if understanding her internal conflict, although he doesn't delve too deeply into it, suggesting she relax. Meanwhile, Sierra is completely immersed in her thoughts, unable to get them out of her mind, and her attention is completely absorbed by the memories, experiences, and fears she cannot overcome. He calls her by her name, and this immediately reminds her that they agreed that using each other's names would be a sign of trust and special understanding, confirming their closeness and bond. Arden cannot simply give up his duty to protect Rippleton, as it is his obligation. And bankruptcy is not an option, especially because the consequences would be catastrophic for those around him. Therefore, even if he had desires to betray Sierra or act against her, such thoughts could not materialize, because his duties and obligations to those around him prevent him from breaking given promises. Strangely, this pragmatic and somewhat cold approach, apparently devoid of romanticism, is calming for Lady Brillux, as she understands that his actions are strictly motivated by necessity, not by emotions. Meanwhile, in the party hall, the gazes of many guests and participants turn towards Bellietta and Leighton, who dance with grace and elegance, attract attention with their harmony and almost perfect movements. However, the sudden appearance of the protagonists generates a wave of murmurs and conversations that do not go unnoticed, attracting Bellietta's attention, who cannot hide her interest. She shivers in surprise. Her eyes immediately open, full of astonishment and aware of what is happening around her, observing the reactions arising from the new event. Bellietta sees her friend Sierra, who does not hide her affection and joy as she walks hand in hand with her fiancé, a moment that seems especially significant to her. Bellietta, without hiding her surprised reaction, calls Sierra by name. Upon hearing her, the young woman immediately turns her gaze towards her, giving Bellietta the feeling that her attention is something important and transcendent in their relationship. Then, Sierra smiles in the typical way of a girl in love, and her expression and gestures clearly shout about who she was talking about earlier, reinforcing all her words and emotions. This fact deeply impacts Bellietta, as everything begins to go off her original plan, and her confidence in success is strongly shaken. Meanwhile, Sierra, perceiving Arden's reaction, starts a conversation with him, mentioning that she heard he hates being the center of attention and usually avoids dancing, which makes his behavior even more enigmatic. But for Arden, in moments like these, attention can be crucial, as it helps show that Rippleton is not just a name without strength or meaning, but a symbol of something important and powerful. And for him, conveying that strength and meaning requires dancing masterfully, demonstrating that he can be the center of attention and leveraging it to his advantage. However, Arden is not at all happy with Sierra's laughter, which brushes against his pride, causing internal irritation that he tries to contain. Addressing the young woman, he tells her that he clearly did not expect to see her at this party, and his words directly impact her heart, generating a strange mix of discomfort and interest. But Sierra remains restless, as she feels Arden does not value the contract the way she does. And this restlessness grows every minute, despite her attempts to hide it. Faced with her doubts, Arden reflects on what Sierra would do if he simply ignored her, and what that would imply for their future relationship. Unable to hold back any longer, Sierra grips his shoulder tightly, making him flinch in pain at that instant. And her determination and strength are revealed to him in a way never seen before. Then, moving close to his face, she whispers that he would have known the intensity of a scorned woman's anger. And her words sound like a threat, loaded with tension and resolution. The Duke, embarrassed, initially does not understand the meaning of her words, and his bewilderment increases the tension of their conversation, making everything seem more mysterious. Intense. Meanwhile, in the ballroom, Bellietta's allies begin to protest Sierra's dance. And Arden, not understanding how those two got so close, or why they are dancing together. Some of them point at the couple, wondering what their behavior means. And they discuss it among themselves, not hiding their surprise or displeasure. Bellietta, as always, takes the opportunity to stage a dramatic scene, asserting that those two fit together too well, as if there were a deep hidden meaning between them, or a connection she cannot ignore. Bellietta's followers begin to blush at her reaction, but not all share her point of view, and some start to doubt her conclusions and methods. One of the girls decides this is all a problem because it seems Sierra wants to copy Bellietta and even take the man from her, something that clearly violates her personal boundaries and ambitions. Everyone tries to stop her, but she cannot calm down, considering everything suspicious, and believing that a struggle or a secret plot is hidden behind it. The way Sierra and Arden smile warmly, while dancing seems strange to many. And people start to feel that something doesn't fit, as if it were more than just a simple dance. To many there, it seems that Lady Brillux has stolen the Grand Duke from Lady Basson, which further raises the tension in the hall. And if this continues, Lady Basson will end up looking like a failure, which makes the situation even more tense and increases the pressure on both sides. This reaction surprises Bellietta, who frowns, but tries to maintain composure, controlling her emotions so as not to lose her reputation. She asks if everyone views her relationship with her best friend that way. And her question sounds like a challenge, for which she perhaps already knows the answer. People start spreading rumors about their relationship, and it becomes increasingly clear that the situation is being used to fuel interest in her personal life and generate more speculation. But offending her friend in front of her and turning her into an enemy is a very bold attitude. And she decides that those people do not deserve to be in her circle. Following the offense to Sierra, she expels one of the girls from her group of admirers without hesitation, determined not to let it pass without consequences. The girl tries to shout loudly and apologize fervently, begging for forgiveness, and assuring that she did not mean to offend Lady Bosbon, but the affront was already unbearable. However, Bellietta, without turning around, leaves proudly, taking those loyal to her, ignoring apologies and excuses. One of her subordinates, observing the situation, decides to ask if Lady Bosbon is doing well, and if the current scene satisfies her. Lady Bosbon, despite the tension, acts as if nothing affects her, hiding her true feelings under a mask of calm. It seems her loyal subordinate is beginning to suspect Lady Bosbon's multiple faces, but she decides not to reveal her jealousy. Bellietta, under the recent event, is furious. Her anger turns into a storm because someone dared to offend Sierra. It is a painful blow that touches a sensitive point, eroded for a long time, to which she was not prepared. Meanwhile, Sierra and Arden enjoy the time with light appetizers, conversing, and relaxing, unaware of the changes around them. Bellietta enters slightly late and approaches the table where Sierra sits. And Arden, without wasting time. Sierra, upon seeing her approach, greets her moderately, but with a smile, without showing unnecessary emotions. Bellietta addresses Arden, who responds to her greeting in a calm and neutral voice. Lady Bosbon, with a tone of slight irony, claims not to have expected to see them together here, leaving a nuance of doubt and curiosity. With interest, she continues asking if the man who attracted Sierra so much is precisely Arden Rippleton, generating slight tension. However, Sierra interrupts without wasting time, asking if she has heard rumors that her dear friend and Arden supposedly got married. Sierra declares she doesn't want to hurt her friend, but she needs the truth, since rumors are spreading. And she wants to clarify what is true. At that moment, Sierra feels everything is in her favor, no matter what Bellietta says, since her words could further deny or confirm the rumors. If Bellietta denies that the rumors have substance, her relationship with the Duke will remain beyond suspicion. But if she confirms them, she will cause an even bigger scandal for both. Bellietta plays her part, pretending not to have heard or understood what rumors she is talking about, maintaining her act of ignorance. However, she emphasizes that marriages of convenience are usually held without mutual agreement, and her parents did not reveal details to her, so she cannot give an exact answer. Although maintaining outward composure, Bellietta does not forget that she is not as simple as she seems, and her fixed attention does not allow her to relax in such a situation. Even so, she assures that she would not be offended by Arden and Sierra's dance if the rumors were true, demonstrating her composure regarding the matter. With a slight smile, she asks Sierra not to worry, guaranteeing her that it is not a problem for her, regardless of what really happens. Sierra replies with a smile, promising her that she will not forget her words, as Bellietta remains her closest friend. And she values her words. Bellietta understands that Arden is the man who could bring many problems and troubles to her orderly and tranquil life, but she has no way to confront him yet. And tranquil, but she still has no way to confront him. Despite this, she decides not to intervene in what happened for now, as she does not see a clear path to resolve all the problems with him. After a brief hesitation, she bids farewell to the couple and withdraws, leaving them alone. But without forgetting her internal plan. She orders her associates to follow Sierra's every move closely, meticulously recording her actions, and reporting every detail to keep the situation under control. Sierra responds with a slight smile, affirming that the fault lies with Rippleton, and his intentions have always been sincere. Arden sighs silently, observing the scene and noticing the young woman's gaze questioning his own decisions. At that moment, a clearly upset young man of noble origin appears in the hall. As he was invited and forced to attend, but he feels common among the others. However, he and his godfather begin to talk about Sierra, who has matured greatly. The young man does not remember her, even though she participated in meetings about the army as an ambassador. The older man whom Sierra was invited to dine with has a date with a lady. And he decides it would be convenient to invite the young man to join them, adding a bit of interest to the gathering. The young man hears the invitation, politely thanks the hosts for the proposal. But despite his courtesy, he decides to decline, explaining that he is not ready to join the dinner this time. However, after a while, the young man unexpectedly appears at the dinner, which surprises and slightly disconcerts those present, as his refusal had been quite categorical. The man's name is Castian, and he introduces himself to Sierra, which disconcerts her, as she did not expect to find him in such a place. And this unexpected meeting alters her thoughts. It turns out that Castian was a duke from her previous life and was involved in the military industry, influencing decisions related to force development and the state's economy, something she only had superficial knowledge of. Sierra once witnessed Castian being demoted to the title of duke and knew him only superficially, as he rarely attended public events and preferred to remain behind the palace walls. Castian, realizing his presence might surprise her, apologizes for the interruption, but explains that his godfather considered it important to introduce him to Sierra, as he might play a role in her future affairs. The Count, joking, comments that Castian refused the meeting proposed by his godfather, and mentions it with a smile, which causes a slight blush on Castian, as the situation takes him slightly out of his comfort zone. Sierra, realizing that chatting about trifles makes no sense, suggests everyone sit at the table and, smiling, suggests moving on to more serious and meaningful topics for which everyone is gathered. When Sierra asks if they have met before, Castian replies that their interaction was always limited to formal meetings at the Military Industry Council, where their roles did not allow them to get close. Therefore, considering their common interests and goals, Sierra poses a question. Do you not want to address the details of the next council meeting, which will take place next month to prepare for the decisive points? The Brillekisen family has always supported the strategic direction of Castian's family, understanding the importance of their alliance for future actions and success in the political game unfolding at high levels. The Count, noticing Castian's unease regarding Duke Palev, points out possible difficulties and asks Sierra to help him clarify the details of the situation to ensure everything follows the plan. The support of the Brillekisen family, as well as Sierra's help, will be important steps toward success in the military council, where issues capable of altering the course of events in the state are addressed. Castian, realizing the need for more informal communication with Iro, decides to try to establish closer contact. But suddenly, something catches his attention and interrupts the conversation. Sierra stops paying attention to the men's words and, after slightly turning her head, her gaze fixes on a distant point, as if trying to escape this situation that is not entirely comfortable for her. In the end, she thanks both for the pleasant conversation, but informs them that an urgent matter has arisen that requires her attention. Therefore, she must leave the meeting and not continue the conversation on this occasion. Blinking and smiling sweetly, Sierra suggests postponing the dinner for another time. When she has more time and inclination to talk, without creating awkward pauses in the chat. Castian, who just moments ago thought the meeting would last much longer, is surprised to see Sierra rushing out. And his face reflects bewilderment and some irritation at this turn of events. The young woman, without looking back, walks away, leaving behind only the soft sound of her footsteps, which causes Castian feelings of irritation and resentment, as he didn't have time to speak adequately with her. When Sierra approaches the door, she unexpectedly runs into Arden, who is sure she would leave later. And now both find themselves in a somewhat awkward situation. However, upon seeing him, Sierra decides it is time to leave, without prolonging her presence at the gathering. And after slightly opening the door, she heads towards him with gratitude for his patience. She thanks him for waiting for her and suggests taking a walk, feeling she needs some air to reflect on what just happened. She confidently states that she sees no problems with the next council meeting, as everything will be resolved in advance. And she is calm regarding her future participation, expecting no major complications. However, Arden expresses concern, thinking she might be upset about the previous meeting with Bellietta. Trying to understand how she feels about that moment. She closes in, sensing notes of emotion in his voice. She becomes interested in what Arden thinks about their relationship and how he sees their future after everything that has happened. Arden's gaze becomes more serious. He takes off his jacket and, looking at her thoughtfully, places it over her shoulders, leaving her in a slight state of confusion due to this tender gesture. Sierra, feeling both moved and embarrassed, cannot hide the emotion this gesture generates in her, as she did not expect so much tenderness from him at this moment. Despite all her doubts, which she still feels, Sierra decides that, since Arden is close, she will consider him her ally, ready to act alongside him if necessary. Even if he decides to use her for his own ends, she is sure she can handle him, because she has enough strength and experience not to become someone else's pawn. Sierra learned her lesson and trusts no one, as people tend to hide their true intentions. And she must always be prepared for betrayal. Deep down, she knows that Arden still needs to prove his loyalty and earn her trust. Only then will she feel ready to fully open up to him. Rippleton has no intention of pressuring her with questions about what is happening. He prefers to let her decide when and what she wants to discuss with him. Smiling gently, Arden stays beside Sierra, his face illuminated by the moonlight, creating an atmosphere of calm and security that she sought at that moment. She made her decision, and now, despite everything that has happened, she is ready to follow her path. Aware that he still needs to earn Sierra's trust, but this step was inevitable. No matter what is offered to him, Arden will always choose Sierra, because he knows his place is by her side. And he promises to be by her side when she needs him, regardless of the circumstances. That is all Arden needs to know. As for him, there is no other option than to be on her side, to protect her and support her, no matter what happens. That's why he says he hopes their paths cross again, confident that they will meet again, even if it is not immediately. And he offers to contact him if necessary, insisting that he will always be willing to intervene if he feels someone needs his help. By calling him by his name, the young woman's heart begins to beat wildly, something personal and special that, outwardly, she tries to hide calmly. She calls him as he walks away, feeling she must say something, even if she isn't sure what, to stop him. And she warns him that she does not trust Castian, alerting her to be careful with him, not to rely on his promises, because she senses something suspicious about him. The eldest son of the Paenas seems suspicious to her, as his behavior seems unusual, and his goals might not be what they seem at first glance. When explaining why, she explains it with feelings, affirming that her intuition tells her that behind that person there is something more than appearances and manners. Such an answer makes Sierra laugh softly, as Arden is truly unpredictable, always willing to go against all expectations and not afraid to express his point of view. But she sincerely hopes he keeps his trust, as she feels that behind his words there is something more than just science or politics. Behind this scene in the Palaceate Castle, Bellietta watches through the window, following their every move without missing a detail of what is happening. She doesn't hear what they are saying, but she sees how they say goodbye and notices the smile on her friend's face, which generates strong suspicions in her. This generates disdain and fury in her, as she cannot bear the idea that Sierra can be so happy while surrounded by other people. She remembers how everything revolved around her since her birth, and no matter how much others tried, the focus of all interest was always on her. Her wealth, power, beauty, and genius gave her the certainty that she would always be on a pedestal, and everyone should serve her. Once they brought her a friend so she could start socializing, and it was Sierra, a girl similar to her, whose arrival altered her life, becoming an unexpected challenge. Back at the Brilluxon Palace, Sierra works at her desk, analyzing pending matters, while complaining that it is pouring rain, worsening her work mood. Now everything is focused on mitigating the consequences of the monsoons that hit the region. Although the amount of work is slowly decreasing, leaving more time for reflection, a maid approaches, asking if she needs more tea, trying to be helpful and perhaps pleasing so that Sierra does not notice her nervousness. Sierra asks them to leave the tea, but to call the butler to discuss important matters with someone she truly trusts. Bellietta has her people following her. She can no longer allow them to be near. That's why she wants to replace some of the staff, to ensure greater control and protection. Although the butler tries to stop her, as many employees are busy with tasks following the natural catastrophe, and it would be better to wait for the Countess to return, Sierra is determined. Sierra affirms having full power in this house and needs those she can trust to feel safe in her environment. Then she heads to the training grounds of the Brillux Knights Order, where she chats with those practicing there to learn their opinions and assess the current situation. She wants to find out if the training grounds are used by schedule or reservation, since it is vital to understand how efficiently they are employed. The commander explains that he cannot give an exact answer, as the schedule changes every day according to multiple factors, and it is difficult for him to offer reliable information. Sierra immediately interrupts a conflict between knights and the one leading them, getting involved in the situation and observing how words transform into actions and discontent. It is Mr. Gibson, who is arguing with Vice Commander Gilbert, recently appointed to the position, but already capable of generating a wave of dissatisfaction among his subordinates. It seems this conflict has been going on for a while, and Sierra begins to understand that, with general attention, this situation is not simple at all. In her previous life, Mr. Gibson was an example to other soldiers. That is why she is now particularly interested in the vice commander, to decipher what is causing this opposition. She said she wants to meet with him, hoping the meeting will shed light on the circumstances that triggered this confrontation. Meanwhile, we return to Rippleton's lands, where the house is quiet, but with a tense atmosphere, as Arden is expecting an important guest. Arden has a guest who has been waiting for him for an hour, but he is not rushing to meet them, preferring to finish important matters before attending the appointment. Rippleton becomes furious, maintaining that he should completely ban Bosbons from entering, insisting that their presence only generates unnecessary complications. Of course, the guest is Bellietta, who waits for him alone in the living room, preparing for a meeting she hopes will change the situation in her favor. When Arden arrives, he orders everyone to leave, except Lady Bosbon, making it clear that he is only willing to have a serious conversation with her. Since it is only a report, no problems should arise, and Arden is sure that no additional interventions are required at this moment. The young woman tries to convince him not to be rude, as long as the engagement is not broken. But Arden immediately uses her words against her, refusing concessions. Bellietta understands that Rippleton, once powerful, disappeared in an instant, and the Duke's attitude towards Bosbon changed abruptly, jeopardizing all her plans. The cause is, of course, Sierra, whose presence in Arden's life profoundly influences his decisions. And this seems to increasingly worry Bellietta. But then she tries to take advantage of Sierra, claiming that dancing with her close friend could cause scandals. and humiliation, hoping to manipulate the situation to her advantage. She alleges that people ridicule Sierra for copying her, trying to turn Arden against her to sow doubt in him. She is disgusted to be the subject of such dirty gossip and wants him to be careful in his actions, without falling for provocations or manipulations. Arden considers her words a waste of time. He takes the report and leaves, unwilling to keep listening to useless complaints and attempts at manipulation. When the girl starts shouting that she hasn't finished, Rippleton replies that Bellietta is talking nonsense, convinced that her words lack value. Rippleton believes that next to Sierra, everything becomes evident, and Bellietta doesn't measure up to the sole of her shoes. Because Sierra was always authentic and sincere. Sierra cannot help but shine brighter than the one he calls a sow, because her simplicity and authenticity make her unmatched in Arden's eyes.